Valley, Texas, for Saturday, August 20th, 2022. So Council, just as a understanding how this morning will work, we have two items that I wanted to bring forward because they're a little time sensitive, and I want to make sure that we had a meeting before our next scheduled meeting, which will be in early September, so we can discuss items number 3 and 4. We are going to likely, I hope, for our budget discussion. The purpose of this is hopefully everybody's had more of a chance to read and look through the budget, start considering some of the big items that we might want to talk about as part of our work session. We are going to have 2 more presentations of the budget as scheduled. The public presentations on the 6th of September, and then the 27th is when we're scheduled to have the second presentation and adoption. We can have more meetings scheduled between then as needed, but today, hopefully we're going through the process of identifying major items that we want to bring back at the next meeting so we can do this in an orderly fashion. So with that, I'm going to open it up for citizen public communication. At this time, we'll also have public comments at our other agenda items as well. But if anyone wants to speak at this time before we have our next items, please step up to the microphone. All right, we'll move on to agenda number 3. This is one of the items that is more time sensitive that I want to make sure we had this in place. So with the resignation of Councilmember Litchfield, who is our liaison to the Planning and Environmental Committee, we do have a gap for the next few months until we do new appointments following elections for the liaison position. That'll happen roughly late November is when we typically do that, is after we do the seating of the new council. So between now and then, Planning Environmental is going to have likely at least 3 meetings, and we want to make sure that they have a liaison in council. So this is a temporary position. It's intended to provide that committee with coverage in the absence of having their regular liaison. I believe that council members can be appointed to multiple committees. We don't have anything in our ordinance that contradicts that. So this is open to any council member that may wish to take this on. Again, it's kind of it is extra responsibilities, but it should be just limited to those meetings that we'll have between now and our formal appointments after the next meeting of the council. So with that, I'll open up for discussion or possible motions. Councilmember Johnson.
When we not sat, but when we assigned Mayor Pro Tem position, I remember I nominated it, but that wasn't, or I made a motion to, and it was like the wrong process. So what is the process here?
Well, normally when we seat, or like we do for committee chairs, for vice chairs, for the Mayor Pro Tem, the process is really, we're trying to follow Robert Rules of Orders, which is, everybody, we have a round of nominations so that can be done. We don't make a motion, until the nominations are complete. The people who are nominated then can state whether they accept the nomination, and then we have a round of voting. And that's why we've handled it for those formal positions. For liaisons, we haven't followed that process. It's really just been somebody can make a motion to say, I want this person. We can follow that process though if you want. If you want to nominate somebody and we discuss it, have another round of nominations. If it's only one nominee and they accept, then we can then vote by acclamation.
Yeah, I think I was the one that suggested this as as an agenda item. I didn't know if it even needed to be an agenda item because we kind of just sat around in a circle at our first meeting, and it's just like, what do you want? What do you want? And we just took them. Yeah. I would nominate Alfonso for the liaison position. It's very much in his wheelhouse. I can't do it. You can't do it because we have family on there. But I think either of you two would be good as well. It just I feel like Alfonso is a logical kind of environmental kind of whatever. And if you want to do it, then go for it. But
I don't know how.
Councilor Rosengarten, yeah, let's do that's yeah. Oh, can you turn your microphone off?
I would be willing to do it if Alfonso doesn't want to do it, simply because we just got done with budget and finance, and I've been busy every week, and all of a sudden I've got all this time on my hands.
So it sounds like we have at least 2 people. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, Well, thank you for that consideration, Rob, and thank you for that support. I agree with what do you say. I think that I would like to learn a little more about that committee, and I understand about the finance and etc. But I would like to participate with that committee.
That's it.
Yeah.
Done.
All right, so with that, I think we can entertain a motion to formalize it.
This is probably the thing I'm worst at. It's like putting together the motion, especially if it's not written right here.
Just say, I move to appoint.
I move to appoint Alfonso Carmona, the council liaison to the Planning and Environmental Committee.
Perfect. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right, so the motion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for taking that on for the next few months. I think the committee will really appreciate having your availability and as part of that.
Yeah, but I would like to say that I appreciate the way that we are working, and I like that. I like that, not because it's for my benefit, it's because in reality we are looking for something good, and I think that I will try to do my best. Thank you.
All right, that's going to take us to agenda item number 4. Consider and act on adopting the revised vision statement for the city as follow-up to the city council retreat held in March 2022. And council, I appreciate your patience on this because, frankly, it's been really through a series of variety, of events, over the last several months. It's been hard to find a time when we can have our follow-up retreat. I really appreciate Karen Medicus and Tom Siddell, who's also been working with me to try to give their availability and dates. It's becoming apparent, though, with the timeline that we have, especially with the change in council that we're going to be having with our elections, that we just don't have the availability for meeting and going over our retreat follow-up goals. But the one item that I did want to bring back, because it relates to our comprehensive plan and our land development process code, is finalizing our vision, because we had talked about that being a precursor or an opening statement for a lot of the work that goes on with comprehensive plan and our land development code. We did start on making edits to the vision back in our retreats that we held, and this is where we're at in this process is that we have an edited version, but we don't have a final adopted change, so we still have our existing vision statement. And so what I want to do with this discussion is review what the language that we came up with at the end of our retreats, and consider whether we want to adopt new language or even make edits to that language and adopt a new vision statement, or if we want to keep the same vision statement and use that as our blueprint, for the next, the next parts in the process, and leave any revised vision statement for the next council. That's a possibility as well. But I think we got to a point where everybody was in agreement that we wanted to make the vision statement, edits, because we had a chance to discuss them with the whole council at the retreat, and I think everybody was in agreement that the revised vision statement didn't take away it. We felt like it added to what the city, what this city council at least wanted to impart. So with that, we do have, I think, on the screen and in your backup, the change from the proposed change that we got to with our retreat. We held that on March 4th through 5th, and we discussed revising the statement but never formally adopted the revisions. So, council, at this point, what are your thoughts? This is something that I think that I'm comfortable with moving forward on these changes, but I also want to make sure that, if we, it's council's will in this case. Councilor Rosengard? So
are you thinking this is done, or do you want this rewritten yet, or you just want acknowledgement that we accept it as it is?
I think it could be accepted as it is with, with the work that we did during our retreat. This is the final product that, we came to. But we never formally adopted it, and we also, had, chances to give our input following the retreat. We sent out a survey to prepare for the second retreat that we weren't able to schedule. So for me, I think, what we talked about in that room as far as our retreats, the goals, the vision, this is I think adopts something that everybody felt comfortable with. However, I want to hear feedback.
I agree with you if we follow that vision. And if we use like the italic words, use them as bullet point sentences. I've looked at other city vision statements. Then they stand out even more. So you put a bullet in front of respects, and a bullet in front of fosters, and a bullet point in front of encourages, and another bullet point in front of supports, and another one in front of promotes. And you've got all these bullet points now. But the first one is respects. I don't know if that's a vision we're hoping to do in the future, if we're supposed to do this now. The reason I bring this up, there's a lack of respect right now for our staff, and I want to call that to everybody's attention. Staff works very hard. We appreciate you very much. I want you to know that. We've got lots of pushback on what you do, and so if that's something we're already doing, I would like this statement to be on the top of every council agenda from now on, to remind everybody to respect each other. And if there are mistakes that are made, we all make them. None of us walk on water. That we simply bring that information to the table either before the council meeting, or if we're bringing it to the council meeting, we bring it with respect and simply say, hey, do you have a moment to look at this? Can you look at this? Can you give me some information? But we don't do it in a way where we're accusative, as though someone is doing something purposely, making these mistakes for the betterment of their financial betterment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosengarten. And that was a key point of our retreat discussion, was adding staff was a critical part of this vision statement, since we're all a part of this community.
Thank you.
Councilor Reeds?
So first of all, I think that was very well said, Councilmember Rosengarten. I also agree with that. I do like the idea of putting it into bullet points. And the other thing that, when I look at what does the city do, is, we provide utilities, we provide public safety, we provide the infrastructure for our city and maintain it. Is that captured in that broad statement? Because that is what we do. And we want to make sure those things are clear. And maybe it's captured in that. I'm not great at this vision statement types of stuff, so.
Yeah, I think that, to me, the thing that you're speaking to is kind of the sense of safety in a way, right? Adding something about, keeping our residents, prosperous and, is focused on the economy, but not on the residents and their needs, right? I think that's what you're getting at, and so there might be some.
Well, and it's really just what we do as a city. These are the functions of the city, and is that captured? Because, we need to provide all those services, and we need to do it in an efficient way with a respectful use of our resources and such. And so that's the question I have, is it's kind of captured in there. And this is a more general statement, and maybe it should be just a general statement. Maybe it doesn't have to capture everything we do, but.
Yeah, I think under the umbrella of respects, I think that's kind of where it's captured, and the vision statement is, intended to be a fairly general, but I get your point. I saw Councilmember Rosengarten's hand, and then Councilmember Johnson.
I'm not sure it needs to be captured within your vision statement, because looking at other vision statements, they talk very similar to what we have in ours. Vibrant economy, rural quality of life, sense of community pride. They don't say anything about the economics bringing in or having an enterprise account as the utility account. So I'm not sure we need to, because you were saying the utility account.
Sure, I'm just saying, I just want our vision to capture what our city does and what our city responsibilities are. And to me, they are, we are responsible for the public safety and, utilities and infrastructure, and providing that in an efficient manner.
Business opportunities?
Well, it might be captured there, and I don't want to make a big deal out of it, because I'm not unhappy with that statement. But I just want to make sure that we focus on what we are supposed to be doing. You know, that the focus is what a city does, so.
Isn't that more in our mission statement?
And it
though?
might be, it
Yeah.
might be.
Yeah, I agree.
It might be. So we can, and I'm perfectly happy to leave this, and I'm, you know,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do like your bullets, but I'd be perfectly happy with this.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, my two thoughts on it were just that, like, safety, it's almost like table stakes. And, you know, just like, yes, we observe the rule of law, and it's like, yeah, we don't need to capture just like the baseline. This is kind of like what sets us different from other cities. So, and I know I kind of like the kind of like, I don't know, the aspirational kind of tone to it. You know, it's just, you know, we do a lot. We do a lot of this already, but and especially with like the respect thing, it's just like we try, but we also strive to always do better. So I don't know. I'm pretty happy with it. Bullet points. I love bullet points, so I'm down with that.
Councilmember Rosengarten and then Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll give you an example of a vision and then a mission statement. As one of the most forward-thinking small counties in the state, then they do bullets. We seek to uphold its vibrant economy, rural quality of life, and sense of community pride. Then they switch to the mission statement. The mission of this government is to provide quality public services in a timely and competent manner and to work with the cooperation of the community and other local government units to create a vibrant and healthy physical, social, and economic environment. Services shall be provided in a fair, respectful, and professional manner consistent with available human, natural, and economic resources. So the mission statement.
Can we copy that?
Yes, absolutely, because this
That's
is way
exactly
out in,
what that's
in
exactly
North
what I'm
Carolina,
looking for.
or South Carolina. This is from South Carolina, Hampton County, South Carolina. This is perfect.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I think then Council Member Rosengarten, she covered that. In my mind was that we have to have something about the government. The government and this city, for me, is unique. And it's unique because it has a net from committees and later going to the council. And in that democracy, I think that as a vision is the participation in the government, but perhaps that will go, maybe, you mentioned government after that, and in government later you will have the things that Member Ritz, she mentioned, but I was working in other two cities, and I didn't see that I am looking in this city with the means of government. I saw councils, but not the citizens' participation in the way that is in this city. Perhaps because it's a low number, it's not 60,000 people, we have only perhaps 600. And perhaps you can see more that participation of that people. But if you don't have some values, the people that we are sitting here, then they will go with that vision. I think that is not moving. This is that I try to say. So perhaps I didn't say nothing, but that was the idea.
In council, we could, you know, like, I think a lot of those concepts could be under the mission statement, you know, and that's not, I didn't bring that purposely because it is a lot, you know, that we didn't really touch on that during the retreat. We didn't, you know, but that could be another task that we take on, or it could be something we would defer to the next retreat, you know, that we have for the next council. You know, and if we want to bring this back, that's fine. I would recommend that we adopt this, you know, after hearing from the public that's here, you know, because I think that this encapsulates the primary thing that I like about it is that we talked a lot about staff and the value of staff, and this is something that reinforces that. You know, I think that we also felt that, you know, this is a more forceful statement, you know, than it's just very much tweaked. We didn't make any changes, and I don't want to make a big deal out of, this, but, the inclusion of staff is a big deal to me, and that's something that, I think that there's other things, transparency in government, what the city provides. I think those things are things that we definitely want to include in the mission is, I think, appropriate place, and it might be valuable to bring examples and adopt some of those similar language. Like I said, though, I think this is something that we got to a point where I feel comfortable with this, but I do want to hear, from the public as well at this point. Councilmember Johnson?
So, looks like there was one done in 2020, and then 2022, hopefully we'll get it. But I do like the idea of, when we go to kind of get people on committees, we all hit up our neighborhoods, and, we're constantly just saying, like, hey, it's not that much of a commitment, and
then they're forever angry with
yeah. Then they have to move out, and then the next suckers come in, and we get them on. But we have these, it's kind of like this two-way street thing where you feel like sometimes there's not a lot of people that are involved in the process, but percentage-wise, we actually have like 10% of our residents. Could you imagine if it was like Austin and there were 200,000 people like really engaged in, so I think that is like such a meaningful part that, we try to get as many people in. Austin Council is not like knocking on doors and being like, hey, you want to get on this? So in 2024, I think it would be kind of, I don't want to change it now. I want to like get moving here, but like, I don't know, Alfonso, I really like that idea that it's like, that is like part of our identity where we try to like get everyone involved because it's small enough that you can actually wrap your brain around the city, so.
And members of the public that wish to speak to this item, please step over to the microphone.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I respect the feeling underneath the first bullet, but it feels peculiar to me in that it doesn't capture the entire universe of elements in the city. So I think dealing with everybody with respect is a good thing, but the business community is left out as if they aren't players in the community, like Charles from Docks, and you want more interface like that. It's not this thing out there, it's another piece of the pie. And it's certainly more an elevation than staff. I see what feels like an interesting approach to getting more staff respect, but there is a significant amount of the community that has difficulty with the way the city is run. And if this is a squelch to that, it's probably not going to go over very well. So I think that it's good for everybody to feel heard and respectfully, right? Factually, respectfully. But if it's going to be some kind of desire to quash healthy, respectful debate, that's not good. Everybody needs to be able to respectfully, always factually, be able to say what their experience is. And I know that there have been interesting things that have gone through the Meadows HOA. I know what I hear walking the streets, and people need to be able to express without being quashed, as long as they're respectful and factual, their experience. So I think we're missing the business component of how we integrate that into our vision in terms of constituencies, right? I mean, you have your residents, you have your property owners, you have your tenants, and those are your essential constituencies of the city. And we value and respect our staff, but they're not at a level of the constituency. And I think that's an important thing if you're just like laying out a vision to acknowledge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Medicus, 36 Pillow Road. Hi, Council. It's been a while since we've been in retreat, and as one of the facilitators of that, I just want to remind everybody, it's been a while, I know, but the vision is the big picture. It should be succinct, it should be short and to the point. It's aspirational, as I heard some of you say. And the mission is about what you do. That's the doing of it. The vision is where you aspire to be, your vision for the city as a whole, not what the government does. That's the mission of the government. And I want to remind you too that this was also done by council and then shared with the joint session. So we had representation from all of the committees, and they got a chance to review this and give input into this vision too. So that's where we left off with the work in the retreat. The next step would have been to review the mission, because the city's mission hasn't been updated in many years, and then into the core values for the city. And we never got to that point, and that would have been the second part of the retreat. We can certainly continue that at the next retreat. So just wanted to remind everybody that's kind of where we left off.
Thank you. Any else members of the public wish to speak? Councilor Rosengard?
May I ask Karen a question?
Of course.
Since you're our retreat moderator, do you feel we've captured everything we need?
I do. I think we walked away with a really good vision. I hear what Melissa said about the businesses, but we talk about promoting our businesses. That kind of inclusion and the kind of government that we have could be also part of the mission. Again, that's your action part. This is your aspirational part. And it should be big picture. And you don't want to get it so detailed that it's, you know, paragraphs long. It needs to be short, sweet, big picture.
Thank you.
Further discussion, council? All right. Anybody want to make a motion? Oh, Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, I would. The business thing did kind of. It makes sense to be in kind of that list, because it's like, in the respects, it's residents, people that are here, staff that help us out, the environment. The businesses is kind of like left out there, but then they get like two clauses also, just like that are almost directed towards them. So it is kind of like this weird thing where it's like they're kind of left out there, but it's almost like if you put it in there, then it seems very business, which we are business focused. So so I think that was a good shout. But they also have like two other, I just feel like it would become a little lopsided. So I'll make a motion. I'm always, it's like a programming thing. So we have marked up text here. So like if it's just plain text, like bullets are plain text, but italics are not. So I'm just, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too in the weeds about this, but like that will always, like how do we note that? Well, in the one here, respects, foster, like the verbs are all italicized. So, well, no, but I'm just saying like that we're making a statement via the, like the, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, like the emphasis is not just the text, but it's like the, you know, the, well, bold would be the same thing. So it's just, I don't know why I'm like hung up on this, but I'm fine if the italics are part of it, but like, then that becomes part of the vision statement. I gotta move on from this. I think that looked,
So are you saying you like it or you don't?
I'm fine with it. I don't really have an opinion, but it just becomes one of these things where the vision statement is the text, but it's also the
Emphasis.
Emphasis.
which is, I don't know.
I
can move on.
If we're bulleting it, I prefer to take out the italics. That's just me, but I'm fine either way too. I think it's because it's like a bullet and an
This is why
italics.
this is why people hate government, because we're talking about. So should we remove the italics?
Let's do that, and.
There you go.
And that way, then
I think
it still says what it says.
actually, when I looked at this pre-bullet, something was just often about, you can lose that markup. We call it markup and kind of like, but the non-text, adding italics to the words, and that could get lost. But we do want to emphasize this, and having the bullets and removing the italics, good stuff.
Okay. The one thing is just the "and" on the third bullet, that feels a little bit weird right there. Yeah. And, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. All right. Comma. I guess you either have to have commas on them or just to be consistent at the end. You know what I'm saying? Just, here's the English teacher in me coming out. And then the last one. And, put the "and" there, yeah. Good, perfect. I think that works for me. Peaceful lifestyle, yeah, you don't need the "and" A right there. Healthful, active, peaceful lifestyle supports business opportunities and promotes a prosperous economy and sustainable quality. I like it.
So, yeah, this, usually you can just take the description on the agenda and say, I move we, and then it's all like written out for you, but it sounds like a ridiculous motion if you just read it from there. So, I move we adopt a revised vision statement for the city. As edited. There you go.
Very good. I will second.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah. Perhaps I like more italic, the forms of the letter. I'm sorry for saying that, but look, and this is one style. Some people, the people that in humanities, they are more as a phrase. So they have a phrase with sentence. And the people with more orientation as engineering or mechanical, you go by points. So at this moment, when I am looking in that, for my preparation, I understand that point. But if I was a writer and in humanities, the other phrase is very common. So, but you can use any. The only thing is, for me, I think that I will do a little more difference. So the italic gave it to us a little change, but that doesn't mean that you can read it that way or read it the other.
Would you like to make a friendly amendment, adding every bullet point word in italics?
That words, I like that, only change to italics.
Change the whole
That's,
sentence or
I'm
just the
fine with
first
that,
word?
just to emphasize it more.
I
That's,
don't care, as long as it says the same thing.
so we'll
It's a style.
italicize those verbs again. We'll,
Here, that's the motion maker has to decide if he's okay, if he wants to change his motion.
Is it just the
Well, we
first
just said
word?
as edited, so I think we can.
So you prefer as is?
I was just looking it up. Typographical emphasis, but is like the term that doesn't really fit it. But it's just like you have the potential to lose that in transmission. Bullet points are part of
Yeah.
the statement, but italics bolding can be lost. So I think this, if you were to copy this into Notepad, you would lose the emphasis.
But no bold, no bold. No.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you for saying
Yeah,
that, because
it's
we don't realize that.
Yeah, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, wait, so maybe that's as simple. If you have, I don't know, if you have a plain text editor and not a rich text editor, if you were to copy it, drop it into the plain text editor, the bullets are there, but if you had bold, if you had underline, all of the typographical emphasis
How about just a
is
capital
gone.
letter at the start of every phrase? And that's,
I'm
I'm sorry.
gonna be happy with this.
Mayor, let's do Mayor Pro Tem.
I move and I let that as he proposed initially. So,
Okay.
no italics. So what's a good idea, in my opinion, and I respect you. So I let that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the vision statement as edited, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All right. Thank you, council. We are going to go on break until 10 o'clock and get a chance to get refreshments, catch up on any emails in preparation for our budget discussion, which will take the next, well, up until 12 o'clock is when we are scheduled to dismiss. All right, so we'll resume at 10 p.m. for the time certain item. We'll resume at 10 a.m. for our time certain item.
Golly.
So we'll wait on that before we kick off. Okay. Are we good to go from technical standpoint? And if you have not seen a picture of the inside of the control room, it gets more elaborate every time. Where Duncan is, he's in the NASA Launch Center now, is what it looks like back there. Certainly appreciate this behind-the-scene efforts. All right, so council, we're gonna start our time certain item, which is agenda item number 5, discussion of the budget. Again, this is a discussion item. We're not going to be taking any action for the purpose of this. It's really just to work out where we want to have more details brought back from staff or investigate, using specific items that we asked to bring back from the last meeting. So at the last meeting, I think there were a few items that we wanted staff to provide some more updates to. One is the grounds, detailed breakout of the grounds maintenance, so that we could look at the total cost. I believe that was provided over email, and I think it's been sketched out on this board as well. We wanted to make sure that we looked at the differences between what Budget and Finance recommended at their last meeting and what was presented in the council, or in the mayor's budget. And so there's been a number of emails with that. And then, so we also talked about the utilities subsidy, and certainly policy decisions around that as being something that we want to just focus some time and attention on. There was some additional backup material provided for that. I would also say, just council, as we go through this process, any edits that we want to make, whether it's typographical or substantive changes to the budget book, the mayor's budget, and staff, providing that, worked really hard to turn around something between the last Budget and Finance meeting and when it was formally filed. Like last year, we know there's going to be a number of opportunities for corrections and updates before we adopt the final budget. So if you have those as we go through, and I've taken some notes too about things that I'll highlight or send in notes to staff as a follow-up email. Please mention those as well, so we can get those addressed as part of the revisions to the budget, and hopefully by the time we bring our next budget to the public on September 6th, we can have potentially a revised version that incorporates any of those changes. So with that, staff, I'm happy to start focusing on specific areas. We could start easiest to hardest, or we could start hardest to easiest, wherever we want to spend our time. I think maybe the grounds maintenance is something that it's pretty easy since we started capturing that, and it's I think a good place to start because it gives us breakout. But that's sort of like what I'd say low-hanging fruit in terms of areas that we want to focus on. But it's maybe good for Carolyn to give us kind of an overview, since that was something that we got detailed numbers for and have spent some time looking at. Maybe we can start there, just in terms of like follow-ups that we had from last meeting, is talk about the grounds maintenance specifically, and that'll get us energized for the other discussions to follow.
Sure, no problem. So we wrote a kind of a diagram on how like the budget works and how you're looking at it in your book. So when you look at the overall budget, and especially in some of those big long spreadsheets, you'll see that grounds open space may say 45,000, but as you go through the budget, some of those funds are allocated in different places. For example, if we kind of follow that diagram we kind of drew up there, you'll see that if you followed open space down through its different parts, you'll see 5,000 that is in the general fund public works budget and 40,000 that is in the venue fund budget. Similarly with grounds maintenance, you'll see if you just looked at the overall total, it's 2,224,404, but that is made up of 193,404 in the general fund budget and 30,000 in the venue fund. So how these were kind of allocated is that the majority of work in open spaces is in the 270 acres of green space and conservation areas that the city has there. So anything that focuses on invasive controls, protecting the green space through fire management, erosion control, that is done under that $40,000 kind of budget. There are things that I can't really justify as being a water quality thing and that we're protecting green space, and I think I gave the example of removing poison ivy. Not necessarily a water quality issue, management issue, definitely. That's where we use those funds in the general fund to manage those things. Similarly, with grounds maintenance, we have the majority of it is in the general fund because that is the management of the streets and right-of-ways throughout the city facilities, those landscaping beds throughout, especially the city facilities and over on Jones Road and Westgate and that area. And then there's a section that is in the venue fund because that's when we're talking about water quality ponds and, you know, more of a drainage type areas. So that's why it's split between those two funds. There's also a few other pieces in there, which is in the grounds maintenance fund. So the contract for Texascapes that we'll be bringing forward to council is for $215,404. We also included $8,000 in there. Sometimes we run into irrigation issues that we need to bring an actual irrigator in to make those repairs. And so there's an $8,000 kind of cushion in there so that we can have, Texascapes has an irrigator so that we can use their irrigator to make those more technical repairs that we need to make. So that's where those kind of items fall out and how you can kind of follow it through the budget. I know it could be really odd when you're looking at it, it says this, and then you only come to 5,000 down here. You got to continue through the budget to get to the full total amount of those items. Similarly, I think trails and footpaths also may have 2 breakouts in it as well. So if there's any other questions council has on those items, I'd be happy to answer those.
So I know we went through a rebid process with our open space. I remember roughly what the current number is. Can you tell us how much it's increased from the current contract?
Yes, hold on one moment. Let me look those up real quick.
And, you know, just as a reminder, council, what we asked
Yes.
staff to do, oh, go ahead, please.
Let me go back. I have to go to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting real quick that we did that at.
And so just as a reminder, council, we asked staff as part of our grounds maintenance assessment is to look at what it would cost the city to maintain its own landscaping versus what contracting this out to do is after receiving bids. And after reviewing the numbers, Budget and Finance recommended that we move forward with a contract, especially with Texascapes as the current contractor as part of the rebid process, because the cost of maintaining it was so much higher than even what our new costs are. But this is also a reminder that this cost is much greater than what we are currently paying.
Yeah, so the current contract that we were under with Texascapes was for $188,400. That is what we had put in 2020. We had 2 bids for the landscaping services, Texascapes, which was $215,928, and then Brightview, which was $301,750. So there are 2 bids that we have, and you know we've got pretty significant difference between those 2 bids. So it doesn't include obviously any additional services, and it is an increase more than what the city currently pays for landscaping services. But that is
So it's roughly $27,000 higher than what we're currently paying.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So, Councilmember Johnson.
I remember one of the benefits of bringing it in-house was going to be that in the winter, or like in certain seasons.
Off seasons.
Pardon?
Off seasons.
Off season, you know, we can kind of redirect them to do other stuff. I didn't listen to any of the, or I didn't look at how Budget and Finance came to, was it just like a purely numbers thing where they're just like, that's cheaper, go with it? And was there nothing put on the fact that we can use our own staff to kind of do other things that we want to do that aren't in the contract?
Right, that consideration was made, and we did provide numbers on how much it would cost the city to bring the landscaping in-house, and we do feel like it would probably be cheaper at least the first year, but of course salaries and everything grow year after year, and we'd be pretty close to the $215 by the end of the 3rd year. And so Budget and Finance, I believe, felt that, you know, you're locking in a solid price here, and they had made some comments about having to, you know, right-size public works staff to do the work that we still need to do out in those spaces, and maybe that's a separate issue from the landscaping contract, was their approach to that. So they did recommend overall to stick with the landscaping contractor, and that possibly, you know, in the next round in 3 years, it may make a whole lot more sense, because we know that the contracts are just going to keep going up every year. It may make a lot more sense at that time to bring staff in-house to do these projects, especially depending on what we do with some of the open spaces around us. So there is that consideration. But to go ahead and lock in the price at a certain number, and all the risk is on Texascape's part then at that point. For everybody's having problems getting people to come in to fill jobs and things like that. So, but then it's on Texascapes to provide that and to meet those demands.
Are the things, we need to get Sylvia a smaller monitor or a transparent monitor, because I can never see you.
Yeah, I know.
But, so, are there, one of the things that Texascapes does is they mow the right-of-ways in Old Town, or
They mow
this
the
side.
right-of-ways throughout, the residential right-of-ways throughout the city.
Yeah, and it's crazy on this side because it is 8 feet, not even 8 feet, 5 feet. And I think Fred, who mows our lawn, mows it anyway because he doesn't know this invisible line. And if you were to, I mean, this is something that would require a larger effort, but maybe, you know, for 3 years we go with Texascapes, and then we just say, by the end of this 3 years, we want to bring it in-house. I don't, you know, if money were no object, I wonder what council would think of it. Like, this is something we want. It should be a core competency of our city. We can use those people to do other things. I think we get a higher level of service. We have a better chance to say, don't spray Roundup everywhere. But I think what we might have to do to be able to control our own costs is just say, residents, most people have someone that does their lawn, I have to imagine. And just figure out how to kind of move around the workload so that whoever does it in-house, you know, can focus on some other stuff.
Yeah, so
I think the only reason the Budget and Finance Committee didn't, I mean, set aside the outside rhetoric, but from a number perspective, the issue was we do have this looming, you know, we want to get staff to $22, and, you know, what impact is that going to have on the budget? And that is, there are 3 things that I said were uber critical in the budget, and that's one of them as part of our long-term plan, right? How do we get there? And because we hadn't worked on that, that was their main reason. But they also said, when this contract is up, let's, you know, look at that again. And you heard some discussion about if Public Works needs more help, and it was really centered around that, is how do we get our arms around and managing the workload so that we don't have these perceived quality issues that prompted this discussion in the first place.
And to go back to one of the things you were mentioning, Councilmember Johnson, there is the question regarding the mowing of the residential right-of-ways. I know that Councilmember Rosengarten, I think, has sent out information to the Meadows neighborhood, and the majority of them mow their own right-of-ways. And the only ones that are questionable is that the Meadows in particular has about 6 to 8 houses that have incredibly deep ditches. And so there's a discussion that we're going to have regarding that maybe the city only mows those areas that are more technical kind of mowing, those areas, and then that we take that time that would be spent on the mowing of residential right-of-ways that are already getting mowed almost throughout the city, basically, and redirect Texascapes to some other work. Maybe it's the Granite Trail maintenance, maybe it's something else. So we are going to be, and Richard Fadal was at the Budget and Finance meeting, and he was very open to looking at one of the things that we had experienced, especially I guess since COVID started, was a lack of flexibility within the contract with Texascapes. And so I think they're a lot more open to that kind of flexibility and reassigning, being like, okay, no, we're not doing this here. We're gonna, this is grown in more importance. We need to be able to redirect you guys to work over here instead. Mm-hmm. So we are going to be discussing that when we do the final contract and everything with Texascapes to make sure we have that flexibility. Because you're right, the majority of residents, a lot of them mow their own right-of-ways. So yeah, it's kind of silly for us to come along and mow the right-of-way again.
And it adds up, all of that.
Yeah.
Because I think, I forget what ended up being the $60,000 that was added to the contract when I forget what it was, but you looked at, I don't know, it just seemed like you know, in your mind is like a small amount of property, but then you extrapolate it over the city and you're like, oh man. My last thing is just, in this budget, we're setting aside the money for the Texascape contract, right? This is their quote. Was this, the Roundup thing is big for me, you know, that it's.
Yeah, and Texascapes knows that now. So I think that also is a consideration on why the contract went up, because the organic methods and the non-Roundup versions of stuff are more expensive. So that is a factor into why that contract went up.
Yeah, my eyes are open on that, and I think when, I think I just got on council, it was like right before, and we were, you know, it struck me like how much goes to Texascapes, and, you know, it's our responsibility to kind of like get the biggest bang for the buck for our city, but I sometimes would wonder, how much are those people getting paid? Like, I want our like city staff to come in at like as close to a living wage as possible.
Yes.
And I don't like, it's Texascape's business what they can get their staff for, but you know, we have a problem in this country with like, you know, a widening gap between like the bottom and top, and you know, for us to just like ignore it and just say like, oh well, we're just trying to get the lowest wage for this, and just be part of the problem and be like, well, that other company doesn't pay them, so like out of sight, out of mind for us.
Right. So that question also came up, I think, at Budget and Finance, and if I'm not mistaken, I think starting salary for Texascapes is $18 an hour, so it's higher than the city's starting salary.
Okay.
So, yeah, not that, yeah. So, and actually, I think they move up pretty quickly to keep their employees there. So
That makes me feel really good about that
Yeah.
company. Then thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that's just the market also.
Yeah,
You know,
in
you
order to
have
keep them.
You have to be able to compete because there's limited amount of employees out there
Yes.
to hire. So, yeah, I'm personally okay with this. So this is we don't have to bid for rebid for another 3 years.
It'll be a 3-year contract.
This is a 3-year contract. So I think they did an excellent job. I appreciate Budget and Finance going through all of that analysis and looking through all of that, and I am happy with their recommendation, particularly with the non-Roundup approach.
Yeah, yeah, they know now that we're not going to support the use of Roundup, so.
Yep. Thank you.
Councilmember Rosengarten.
I just wanted to go back over this analogy right here, or this diagram to show everybody. Also, I had questions that on the page 76 of our digital budget book, code number 5744, 5743, 5753, they're 12,000, 4,500, and 4,500.
So
Are
those,
they
yeah.
within this 30,000?
No, those are separate line items, separate for different activities. They're addition to all of those.
So there's another,
15,000, 20,000, 20,000.
so where is that coming from? What department is that?
Those are all in public works, so.
Sylvia, if you have the memo that I sent yesterday, they can see that in green.
Okay, so here we go. So you're looking at this one, you have landscaped areas, which I think is 4,500, parks and grounds, which is 12,000, and trails and footpaths, which is another 4,500 right here. So those are all in the general fund budget. They're separate line items. So for example, landscaped areas, yes. They are in the general fund. They're in general fund. Yeah, not in venue. There is some trails over here in venue though, which I think is 2,000.
What I'm trying to show everybody is the general fund will show the dollar amount up here, and then it will show it again down here in public works, because
Yes.
it's like an upside. I figured I was loud enough. Okay. It's like an upside-down funnel. So you have to remember in budget, general fund pretty well pays the majority of our bills. So you'll see the number in general fund, you'll see the number again in Public Works, and then and the same with others. And then here we have the venue tax. We have landscape funds that we pay for out of the venue tax, which are allowed via the venue tax. So you have to be careful that you don't take something down here in Public Works and add it to something from general fund and then have this big inflated number and worry, why are we spending so much? It's the general fund pays for it. So just want to make sure everybody understands that. So you'll see the number here and then you'll see it again down here.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I think that in the email that I sent yesterday, you can see that they have in green, if you will go up, when you will see the first green is in the 15,000. And if you can zoom, so, and go to the left, okay.
One more time, make it bigger.
Okay, then I try to say this. I am agree and I support to maintain the 200 acres that we have. Obviously, then each area, because they are different, our open space is different, they have different maintenance. But I think that it's important to understand the expenditures. And when I say that, and I put a lot of emphasis, is because what happened? At this moment, we have a contract that they will cut the grass, and they will be working with the city. And these people cut grass, and maintain some of the areas. And this is why we don't have 3 extra employees, because they proposed 3 extra employees. But looking that paper, the paper from the budget, we are looking that we have to spend, in addition of the 213,000, we have to spend, okay, is here my green? Let me see, is here. Water quality pumps, $15,000. Repair and maintenance parks and grounds, $12,000. Repair and maintenance natural waterways, $12,000. Repair and maintenance trails and footprints, $6,500. Repair and maintenance landscape areas, $4,500. Repair and maintenance water quality ponds, $3,500. All of that gave it to me $53,500. Now, I don't want to say that somebody's taking the money. Then I would like to say this: if I have 213 and another 53, I have $266,000. Then we spend with that. So we are spending more than $1,000 per acre per year. Is inexpensive? Yes. But I think that we need to be sure that we allocate that money and we use that money for that purpose. This is that I try to say. I don't criticize, and they support this, and if the staff, they made that numbers, they know why they made that numbers. But they need to be careful, because in one moment you repeat repair and maintenance water quality ponds, and was 3,500 here, and the other was in ponds was water quality ponds, $15,000. So this is that I would like that, if it's not only to put some titles, we have to be sure what is that. And this year is critical because perhaps will be so dry next year. So if these guys with the contract, they have some flexibility, we need to start since now looking how we will be doing that. Now, according with the budget, we don't project to hire the guys that they used to come every year, right? Joe or something, how they call that? The group of people then they used to help you.
Yes, we will still have American Youth Works come out. They do the open space projects.
Okay,
Yes.
but what is located that?
That is in the 45,000. So I think that you have to look at it as two separate pieces too, because grounds maintenance is right-of-ways and streets. It has very little to do with the 270 acres of green space that the city owns.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the 266,500 is one part. In addition, $45,000
So-
for the American something.
So $45,000 is basically, well, plus the natural waterways, so it's a little bit more than that, is what we would spend out in the green spaces and conservation area. That's for the almost 270 acres that the city would be maintaining. The 223,000 plus the 4,500 plus the 12,000 plus the 4,500 are what is done to maintain the streets and right-of-ways and city facilities and trails along the streets and the city parks when we have to bring safety surfacing into the playgrounds and things like that. That is, you have to almost think of them as separate things. So overall, 270 acres is, we're not spending a whole lot of money besides what's there to maintain the green spaces.
Okay. But
Is that adequate?
At this time, I would say yes, and that's mostly because I know that American Youth Works and a lot of people are having to change a lot of things for their recruitment and to get people to work. So we could definitely use more so we could get more work done, especially on the fire maintenance areas. But I think this next year, until they get their staffing and those other organizations like them get staffing up to par, I think we're going to have a difficult time arranging for them to be able to be here on a more regular basis. So I would say that this year I think we're good, but next year if they can get their staffing up to par, I would love to have more time so we can have those guys out in the green spaces much more often.
Mr. Chairman?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes we use 200 acres and sometimes we use 270. What is the difference? Why?
So the city has about 270 acres of city-owned property. However, I wouldn't consider all of it green space and conservation area. You have the city facilities property, you have like the entry to Westgate that's managed mostly by Texas Gate because they do that mowing in those areas. So I'm saying, you know, there's the open spaces are going to be our green spaces and conservation, our big green spaces and conservation areas where the majority of our trails are and stuff like that. So the city has 270 acres basically of city-owned property, but some of it, like city facilities, managed under Texascapes, the majority of it is going to be managed by city staff out in the open spaces.
Yep. So,
Yeah, about 250 acres of conservation area basically in green space that we're looking at.
I think that in reality we have 65 acres for conservation, no? 65 is conservation.
Acres is just the size of the Sunset Valley Nature Area. When you add on the 40,
Or 65 natural and 40 conservation.
but you also have to add in the Cougar Creek properties, the Indian Grass property, and so you're looking at a bigger chunk of land at that point.
Well, it's in our classification of land, only I saw one area 40 acres and the other 60 acres. One was conservation, another was natural, and I don't remember the other 16 acres from the other side, close to countrywide. So this is why I have in my mind that in some of that areas, we are doing one type of maintenance, other type of maintenance, and this is why sometimes we hire a special people such as that American company that used to be 38,000, now you put 45,000, and it's okay. And again, I support that. My only concern is that if in reality they will be doing the job, That's all, because if later we will be using, oh, I have 12,000 here and I use for other purpose, I will be upset.
Right.
Because if at this moment we say over $300,000, over 300,000 we dedicate to our open space. I want to see that. And that doesn't mean that we don't steal with employees, because you have one supervisor and the director and the operation. You have people in addition to support these. So this was my point when I was looking. And this is why the other day I asked that questions, and Councilmember Rosengarten was in the same way. And I am glad that you explained, and I support you, and we need to be behind that. That's all that I try to say. Thank you.
Councilmember Rosengard.
If you don't mind, now. Talk about Alfonso's questions that he brought up at the last council meeting, and then talk about Chip's questions, and then go into the budget. Get those questions answered, and then.
We can proceed with that.
Sylvia, please, can you, so we can go to the end. I think that the staff, they prepare this list with the budget, and when I was looking that, for me it was more easy to be working because it's an abstract. So I tried to put in one moment all the expenses. And can you go up, please, Sylvia? Up. Yeah, and if you can zoom. So you can see left. You can see that total revenues was $9 million with $94,512. So all my revenues, I don't put nothing than subsidies or transfers. And later with the other, I went to total expenses, and I made it the same way. I removed the transfers and subsidies. That gave it to me $9 million. In that $9 million, I have included the projects that they wrote, the CIP projects. That is $1.3 million in CIP projects, according with the list. So when I saw that, I have revenues for $9 million, and I have expenditures for $7.6 million, but if because 7.6 in general fund, because the $1.4 million, the $1.3 million of CIP, they are from different funds. But in the operational fund, in my mind, I have 9 million revenues and 7.6 expenditures. Plus, I have to adjust that. Utility subsidy, 933,000. Infrastructure, additional 210,000. So I need to know, because you know, and will be more simple for me, and perhaps for other people, what additionals do we have and which transfers do we have for this budget 22-23?
Do you want to go by them by fund?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
So I will be typing because later I will be doing my numbers.
Okay. Let's go by fund. So in the general fund, let's see. Let me pull up expense. Well, actually, let's just go to the budget book so everybody can find it. Let's go by fund. The general fund obviously is the largest. That is the, you know, that's the workhorse. Let me go to. So in the general fund, from reserves, there is a transfer of 14,341. That's in the general fund.
So, Sylvia, you say, we will transfer 210, 1, 2, 3 transfers from general fund, and where you will allocate that?
$210,000 is for utility infrastructure. Do you want to go by your worksheet?
No, you
Okay.
you tell me the
So
numbers.
$210,000 was an allocation for utilities infrastructure.
Okay,
So, but it didn't go into the utility fund per se, it went into the utility fund reserves.
yeah.
So I want to go by, okay, so let's go by fund.
Oh, you have 210 to reserves.
Yeah.
And maybe in one of that places you will have 933 for the utility subsidy, perhaps.
Correct. So the original estimate for the utility subsidy
Yeah.
was 849, 889.
But now you have 933.
933, 372, yes, there was, that's a difference of 83, 483.
No, you say 933.
933,
372.
372, yes.
So that will be, you will send that to reserves, or where you will send
No,
that?
that's actually going into operating expenses in the utility fund. And that's related to two things. It's related to the COLA, and it's related to the stipend. Actually, it's related to three things: the COLA, the stipend, and health insurance. But it's operational expenses.
Yeah. Yeah, what salaries?
Health insurance.
Health insurance. And the issue with that, and you see it in all of the emails going back and forth, is we originally programmed a 4% COLA in the budget. As we fine-toothed the budget, it wasn't included in some funds, specifically the crime control fund. For whatever reason, it was a thumb error, a finger error, whatever, it wasn't included. And so when we do salary adjustments, it doesn't just hit the general fund. Every employee is allocated by time to a particular fund. So it's going to have a disproportionate impact on the general fund, yes it is, but it also has impacts to the other funds. So when we adjusted the COLA and adjusted the stipend and adjusted everybody's salary, it did have an impact on every single fund. The crime control fund has operational costs that are related to salary in it. So when we made the corrections, that was the change in that. That 83,000 is a change in operational costs related to personnel in the utility fund. We have to submit a balanced budget in the fund, so it required a transfer in. That's going to at some point increase the transfer from the general fund into the utility fund or taking it from reserves.
Okay, so we have 210 and 933. So do you have something more?
Yes. So the transfer from reserves of 1.56702, that's the 1.317 for the capital improvement.
Okay. 1,500,000.
1567082. I'm on bullet number 3 of your spreadsheet.
Okay. So that money is what?
So that includes 1.317, which makes up the capital improvement plan.
Thank you.
That includes $235,741 from crime control. Originally, the crime control was going to pay $90,000 in equipment from reserves. They made that decision to not transfer out of repair and replacement, to go ahead and take it out of crime control reserves. So the delta between 90 and 235 is the additional transfer from crime control, again, to adjust for salaries.
Okay, you say they remove 90,000 from venue?
No, crime control.
They remove 90,000 from venue and they put in crime,
No. So there was some projected expenses for police
Yeah,
that were going to come out of equipment repair and replacement. The committee made the decision to take it, instead of taking it from repair and replacement, to take it out of crime control. In addition,
okay.
there is, let me see, equals 235, 741 minus 145, 741 to account for salaries, COLA, health insurance changes.
Okay, in addition of these $1.5 million,
No, not in addition of the 1.5, included in that 1.5.
will be how much?
1.317 for the CIP,
Yes,
235, 741 from crime control,
yes,
and 14,341 from the general fund.
14.3. You say 14.3 is 14,000?
Yes, 14,341.
Thank you. Okay. So now,
Okay, so now moving on to, well, those are the main transfers. I don't,
okay, so
So-
that gave it to me $2.7 million.
no, that should equal 156.
No, that gave it to me 210, 933, and 1.5 means $2.7 million in transfers.
He's adding the utility subsidies, the infrastructure
Oh.
subsidy, and the $1.5 million.
Okay, yes.
So Sylvie, just to pause for just a second so I can make sure I have my numbers correct. The adjustments for the COLA and the salary stipend and the health insurance, what I'm tracking as far as numbers is 83,483 in the utility funds. That was an increase because
Yes.
of, it wasn't accounted for there.
Yes.
Roughly 145,000 in the in the crime control and prevention district,
Yes.
and then the 14,000 in the general fund.
Yes.
And so those three numbers account for the correction from what Budget and Finance saw
Correct.
of the impact of the COLA, the salary stipend, and the health insurance. Okay. So
And-
I'll make sure that's
Yes,
the total
yes,
breakout. Okay.
Yes. There's some other minor adjustments, because obviously when you touch the salary, you're going to touch, all of the things related to salary. And then there was some things that we took out as parking lot items were approved. And again, that has a domino effect on everything else. For example, we took out mileage reimbursement because they approved the vehicle. So,
Yeah, and Council, that's also kind of answering, I think, one of the questions about the difference between Budget and Finance. What Budget and Finance approved as far as the salary stipend, COLA, health insurance, we had to increase that number by roughly $240,000 because it wasn't fully accounted for, and that was distributed among those three funds. So that is something to consider, right? The cost of the COLA and the stipend is a bigger number than what Budget and Finance reviewed and recommended, but it is in line with the 4% COLA and the 5% stipend. That's the true cost. And Mayor Pretend, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, so I'll let you go ahead and proceed. I just want to make sure that I looked at that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think at this moment, when I am doing that total, this will be transfers or subsidized. So how much money would be the transfer and how much money would be this 1.567? I know that 1.317 is CIP. That CIP is different because you are taking that from different accounts. But the 235,000 and the 14,000, from where you will take?
Crime control and the general fund.
Well, crime control, I think that you don't have more money, because in crime control, we are in the $400,000, and the expenditures always they are in the same order or more. So how we will take that from crime control?
It's crime control reserve, and that 400,000 estimate has been based on sales tax tracking, and sales tax have come in higher, so the ultimate ending balance has been higher.
So if you can help me, so how much money will be the total revenues?
In terms of
Revenues?
total, okay.
Because the money that I can see as a cash is $9 million. The other is a gain that we are doing inside.
Correct. Money
moving and
coming
moving,
in. Yes, there is less money coming in than is going out, because we do have programmed dollars coming out from the reserve accounts.
So when we are looking, then this is $9 million. I am looking in this summary. Then we have, then we anticipate to have at the end almost $12 million, and this is done at this moment. I don't understand that kind of thing, so I think that will be clear in that way, because it is not new, and I have 6 years following with the budget, and always was unclear sometimes how they were playing with with this subsidy and transfers, but it's critical for me to understand now. I am looking only $9 million as a cash net. So
Correct.
from where I will go to the 12?
So you have to remember fund accounting. So every fund is its own company. So when it receives money from one of the other funds, it creates revenue. So the utility fund, while it only makes $1 million in utility sales, $1,075,000, a little less than 1.1 million, it has transfers coming in from reserve accounts, and so that accounts as revenue. So that's why it appears you have $9 million worth of revenue, but $12 million or so worth of expenses, and that's related to money coming in. Every if you were to do this on an accounting T, it's municipal fund accounting. If you were to do it on an accounting T, right? Every T is a fund, and every T is a company. If one company transfers to another company, it's realized as an expense here. It doesn't offset revenues here. It offsets an expense, and then it creates revenue in the new company. So it's almost like double dipping. And I went through this with Budget and Finance in the very beginning, that it appears we create money with the transfers, but in essence, it's the same $7 million that we're working with.
Okay, perhaps later we can discuss that, so face to face. But look in that table. Sometimes for me it was important to see how much money do we start. So we start as a total $26 million. This is
the Barbara Wilson table?
Yeah. So we start with the $26 million. And we have a good year.
Where is that table?
We have an excellent year, and we have good money.
Let me pull it up. Yeah, the budget. Okay, let me pull that up.
But at the end of the year, I can see that now I have $26 million for 72. So this is at the end of the year 23. So I will have less money in 23. I will have that is because some of them, if I am looking, the funds, they don't have a big difference. So why I will have less money if I will have more revenues?
Because you're transferring out of, those revenues are in essence coming out of your savings account. And so from a bank account perspective, you have your checking account, which is your everyday
Yes.
expenses, and then the projects are coming out of your savings account per se. They're coming out of those special dollars that you want to do. In your own personal household, if you were going to do, you're operating your household and you're paying your electric bill and your utilities bill out of your normal checking account. When you go to, let's say you want to do a bathroom remodel, and you're going to pay for that out of savings. When you write the checks to the contractor, you have to be able to write it out of a checking account, not a savings account. So you move the money into your checking account and you pay the check out of there. When your bank statement comes, it looks like that month, instead of receiving $5,000 in your bank account, you received $7,000. You didn't make any more money, but you had more money available because you transferred it in.
Yes, my last question. So, if somebody will ask me that the net is $9 million, how I will tell them that is 12 or $11 million?
If it were me describing it to a resident,
Yes.
I would say we have $9 million of operating expenses, and
No, revenues.
Yes, $9 million of revenue, and we have decided to put some projects in the budget that requires us to transfer out of our savings account into the budget.
So, in reality, it was $9 million, but we will spend $12 million. So, we are spending more than the revenues than they are coming.
That is correct.
Well, this is that we need to understand.
That is absolutely correct.
Because for me, this is that I have to be very careful that I am spending, not because every session we have every month, look, we have more revenues than expenditures, more revenues than expenditures. So we create in the mind of some people that is talking with me,
Yes.
then
So-
we have that, but this is not the reality as I am looking.
Absolutely. So two things. One is we are in month 11, so to
Yes.
speak, but we only have money received from month 9 because we're always 2 months behind, ¿verdad? So there's two ways to look at it. And when this was discussed with the council in the preliminary and both the budget and finances, my comment is we can either do one of two things. To balance the budget, we can pay from excess revenues that we receive this year, right? Because this number is based on a projection, and it's based on a pretty conservative projection. We've been receiving a lot more, so that number is going to be higher. This is the same argument you heard from people when Regine was accounting on how did we repay the city back so quickly? It was going to take us 8 years? Why did we only pay back? Because the revenues are conservative and more money is coming in. That's the first thing. To balance a budget, you can prepay for things. You can say, I'm going to pay for those CIP expenses out of excess revenues this year, and I'm only going to pay for those projects that I have excess revenues for, so that you don't touch reserves. But it really is 6 one way and half dozen the other, because the extra money is falling to your savings account, and when you go to write that check for that bathroom remodel, you got to pull it out of the savings account anyway. So
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So just while we're on this topic, I want to make a couple of points because it matters, you know, in terms of like how much money we're spending. Oh, I'll be mobile.
No, not very.
All right. So when we say, you know, look at that bottom line number of how much money the city will have at the end, it obviously is going to be influenced by what our revenues end up being for this year, but it also is not accounting for the full expenses that we have planned for next year also. So you look at this $26 million, 472,000. There's two important things that I want to point out. The repair and replacement fund, that's assuming that we don't spend any money in our repair and replacement fund. We are going to spend money in our repair and replacement fund. That's why we put $20,000 in our repair and replacement fund because we're going to spend money there. So that fund is not going to grow. It's not going to be static, right? We have zero in expenditures programmed right now, but that fund is essentially, when we need it, we take advantage of repair and replacement. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in repair and replacement. The other big one is that we have 1.317 in CIP. That's only for the new projects. We still have the existing projects where the 1.741 is our encumbered expenses for our existing projects. So we know we're going to spend more. If we do all of our existing projects plus the new ones we're approving, it's going to, we're not going to end up with 1.741 in the CIP fund. It's going to be less than that because those projects are going to be, the encumbered funds are going to be spent this year. So this 26 million is going to be, if we really forecasted what we're going to spend, it'd be less than that. But that typically is offset by our revenues, and that's been past the case for a few years. But if our revenues come in flat, that 26 million is going to be down by probably $1 million, couple $1 million, right?
I would expect it to be changed a little bit, but the CIP fund, the odds of us spending all 1.3.
Correct. We're not. It's hard for us to execute on projects. We know that. But if we do a big street bid and we do all that, that's going to come out of that 1.7 plus the 1.3. And I just want to point that out, just because those are two areas where we know we're going to have expenses, but we're not presenting them as what the real expenses are. And that we talked about this last time. We know project expenses are going to go up, so that 1.3 million is an estimate. It's likely going to be higher than that, and the existing projects are likely to be higher than that. So again, that's just to factor in, when we're talking about how much money we have at the end of the city. We are spending more than we're coming in with our current budget.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
And yeah, I'll put down the mic so other people can talk.
In your CIP that you have for this during this year, and I apologize, they include $770,000, and the CIP is more than that. So the CIP projects is more than that. So that say that $1.3 million is CIP, but this is projects. They don't say nothing about that $770,000. So if you will go in that paper that I gave it to you last night, you will see the CIPs. So projects. So where are there the $770,000? In projects, we will spend $1.3 million. And they don't include these 770.
The 770 is part of the 1.3 million. It's just that's the portion that's coming out of the general fund.
Yeah. But in the general fund, you encumber so $700,000 for beautification and other kind of projects. Then they are not here.
Yes, that number, that $700,000 is in the committed portion. That $700,000 is already accounted for up here in the $1.1 million. Up here at the very top line, under general fund, under committed, that $700,000 is included in there.
The 1.1.
Yes, sir. And that $770,000, that's the capital improvement fund.
Yes. To repair that street.
Yes.
Sunset. And
that 1.3 million includes that 7.7.
Thank you, and I apologize. Wanda, I interrupt. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Reitz and then Councilmember Rosengarten.
Okay, I have a couple of issues here. Not issues, just one is I'm going to go back to my push to get crime control budget down to zero, or as close to zero as possible. Looks like we're ending the year with $621,000 in crime control, which to me again should have been drawn down on that. But y'all did a good job, I think, of spending from that. But you still end up with a ending balance of $385,000, and this to me is a tax. And this is a special tax that we have imposed upon the visitors and people who buy products from our city. And the idea of the tax was to, one, it was to pay for the city hall area, but it was also to pay for the public safety. And we should be spending every bit of dollars on that, because those dollars then come from the general fund. And the whole point was to let the general, just to give some leeway to the general fund, that we would not be, some relief there, so that we would not be using the general fund. So that's still my contention. I've had that every year, so y'all know where I stand on that.
My only comment on the crime control, I don't disagree with drawing it down, but just remember that there are some staffing expenses. So if we put in a policy on the fund balance to at least cover maybe 3 to 6 months of staff expenses or 12 months of staff expenses, then I think the rest of the drawdown is appropriate.
Then that would be a great thing for budget and finance to look at. I would recommend 3 months. Because, you really need to get down to as close to zero as possible, that we are utilizing this tax. Otherwise, that tells me that we don't really need the tax, and we shouldn't be taxing. So we should be using this tax. So that's my philosophical thing. The other thing that I think we need to be talking about is the whole philosophical discussion on our utilities. Our utilities bring in about $1 million. I'm kind of rounding numbers but we spend about $2 million on it. So we're about $1 million short on our utilities. Now, there are a lot of different viewpoints on this, and one is we have 250 houses here, and we have a commercial district that utilizes our utilities. And can that amount be, if we were going to make the utility fund a self-sustaining fund, what kind of impact would that be, and is that what we want to do? That is just a philosophical discussion that we generally focus just on numbers and things like that, but I think there's a point where we need to talk philosophically about what we want to do as a city and as we move forward, because this gap is growing bigger and bigger. As our salaries increase, it will get bigger and bigger, and as costs increase, et cetera. And so it's really more philosophical. Right now, we have fund balances and other funds in the general fund to cover these transfers in, but it's really more of a discussion, and I'd really like to see this council engage more in that type of discussion versus, the $12,000 here or the $4,000 here, and to me.
It is a sustainability issue, and I think even when the mayor first came in, there was a couple of things that I said were just not going to be sustainable over the long period of time. If you look at this from just a contractual perspective, how much we bring in and how much we pay out, the utility fund is fine. The utility fund here is classified as an enterprise fund. It is not an enterprise fund. Enterprise funds make money and transfer money out to sustain the general fund. This is what we call a special revenue fund. It needs help from the general fund to sustain itself. If we truly wanted to talk about how much does it cost us for the city of Austin, actuals this year at the time this was printed, which was late July, August numbers, $669 is what we had paid for water contractual services. And then if you add some of our other contract expenses, you're at $671. The utility fund brings in $1 million. So it's covering the basic contract. But as with any business, right, you run Jiffy Lubes. You can't just buy the oil and the business runs. You need the people who, who do that. In terms of how much staff time and the cost of service sheets that we did, were they accurate, how much is allocated correctly, I would venture to say that the staff number, now that everybody is licensed and they do have the ability to work within the utility fund, that staff expense is pretty good. If we took out everything and just said the utility sales were going to pay for the contract and we're going to pay for future infrastructure, you would still need a transfer from the general fund, because the infrastructure work that we have over the next couple of years and to maintain it is still a couple $100,000 every year. And in fact, 210 isn't enough. Carolyn did a a longer-term estimate, 210 isn't enough. So if you add, you know, the projection of where we're gonna end the year, plus what we need for infrastructure, a little over $1 million might just cover it, but that doesn't cover staffing. So the alternative is you move the contract into general government, as with the Austin Fire, so we know exactly how much we're paying, right? And then we do rates based on that, but again, that doesn't cover any of the operational expenses.
I'm not sure we need to do that. It's really, you know, I would want our residents to understand, you know, I mean, some people make a big deal out of subsidies, it's this amount, you know, and there's so much going into these subsidies. One is, I think we need a clearer picture of not just the 5-year window, but at least a 20-year window of what's coming down the pike. And I know we've had some of that information. We have a lot of that information, but I haven't seen it in a while, so that would be helpful to see that. So that, when we look at the drainage fund and that type of thing, you know, to look at that. There also probably needs to be a discussion on what is the right number that for reserves that we want with our utility fund. It's not an unhealthy fund, you know. We've got millions in there. So it's, so there's a discussion on that, and that might be a budget and finance thing of what's our, you know, what is that number? Because I don't know what that number is, and we are extremely conservative in things like that. So, and that's okay. I like that. But it's really more of an understanding that you know, we have water rates that are very low. We have our garbage rates that are very low. We had a cost of service with increased recycling we did not pass on to residents, and we have done with our water, at least the contractual cost, we have said if there's an increase, we will pass that on. So I wonder about the contractual service with our waste collection, if we should be doing anything there. I'm not necessarily advocating anything. I just think this should be a discussion. This is a policy discussion, and that is appropriate for this council. So, and I'm not really advocating for that to put it into the general fund. I like it separate. So,
Councilmember Rosengarten and then Councilmember Johnson.
Going back to when you were standing up and talking about the CIP projects, et cetera, just wanted to remind everybody, don't forget when we were in COVID, we cut all CIP projects. So we had all this extra revenue coming in, and everybody was very excited. We got all this extra money. That money went into the savings account, and now we're pulling the CIP projects to get some of this stuff done, and we're pulling from that savings account. So we have it. Thank goodness. There are ways we can also make this page look more balanced. We can decrease the expenses by $128,761. I'm not sure everybody's ready to do that when we have some projects that have been waiting to get done. We could increase projected revenues by $128,761. Or we could use reserves, and any revenue funds in excess of projected revenues for 23 goes into the reserves to replenish the excess expenses of $128,761. Plus, hopefully more than that. Also, to remind everybody, when Budget and Finance first started the budget process, we were given a projected revenue higher, 5% higher than what we're working with right now. If we went as a council and decided to go 2% higher than what is projected right now, we would then have a balanced budget plus a little excess in revenue. We would look good in the residents' eyes, okay? So there's a number of ways to do this. You either explain what I just said, or we look good up front, they have one page to look at, and they see that the revenues are slightly higher than the expenses, and all they need is one page and they're happy. It all works out the same way. We're still spending the same amount of money. Thank you.
That is a very good point, that the projected revenues that staff put together were reduced by 5% by the Budget and Finance Committee because of the environment that we're in, the unknown environment. And so that is, that's been the propensity for this city. So as a result, we have very healthy reserve balances.
Yep.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's an enviable position for many, many, many cities. No debt and great fund balances. But what that does is it does shed light on our estimating, our projecting, and really what are we planning for? What are we planning for? If we're going to do some things, and I heard, I believe his council member Litchfield made a good point at our last workshop about, yeah, we ended up saving all this money. It would fall to fund balance in public works, but look around you. Look, we didn't get to it operationally. That's not a good thing that you didn't necessarily spend it, because there are some things that needed to be spent. We're now playing catch up with a lot of those things. We were just talking the other day, is $150,000 going to be enough for City Hall? You know, I'm not sure. Is it going to make a dent? It'll make a dent, but we haven't spent significant amounts of money in this building for a long time. And if we are at a point where we're going to convert it or we're going to do any of those things, we're going to be touching major systems, right, that aren't necessarily ready to be touched without some major upgrades. So,
Councilmember Johnson, after that, one request that I would have, it'd be really helpful for me, I'm not sure if it'd be helpful for council, but when we talk about our projected, total balance of reserves at the end of the fiscal year, can we get what our actual bank balance was for like the last 5 years? Because it'd really helpful to see that trend of over the last 5 years. I assume it's grown, but we always look in projected, so it's always a little, you're looking at this number, it's inaccurate, right? But it'd be nice to see like if we can aggregate that number and just see like how much money we've been setting aside because we haven't been executing on projects or excess revenues and things like that, just to get a sense of like every year we're essentially banking money and we're not spending it on the benefit of the community, right? And some, that you could look at it that way. But it'd be nice if we had some visualization of that. Okay. And then Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. So I think as I always say this to us on council, that when we agree on something in here, and then I say, when you're talking to your neighbors, make sure you're doing the messaging, because, whatever the narrative is out there, well, here we're doing it, and we got to go tell them. And so if it shows that we are going to end up with less money over this year, that's not like a failing. It's not like we all retire one day and that's our nest egg. We need to spend it eventually. When we were doing the budget last year and Rudy said, like, do we have 18 months? And it's like, yeah. It's like, let's spend some money then. Like, we're good, because it would have to be a pretty catastrophic event for us to, we do spend a lot of money, but the thing is, like, that's, yeah. But it's a healthy fund, and we got to put it to action. Like, it's almost, but getting back to what you said about the subsidies, I go back and forth about this, because Justin had mentioned to me about, irrigation. It's not a waste of water. That is going into things that help reduce erosion, and the more trees and the more kind of like greenery you have, it retains the water better, and then like the excess, some evaporates, some goes down into the water table. So that's, to me, that says the same idea that he had about doing water capture, like, paying for those systems. That is, we should want people to do that, and we should want people to water as much as they want. So maybe the subsidy does make sense, but at the same time, it philosophically feels wrong. It is a scarce resource. And so, yeah, I think about Brett and Molly, who used to live across the street from me. And Brett one time told me that they would use 30,000 gallons of water a month. And I have one of my bills, and we use about 10. And if you saw our grass, you'd say, well, that makes sense. But it just like blew my mind that you could use that much water on a yard in Central Texas. I almost have a request for Carolyn. Like, can we have somebody come in and just say like, do we want people to be watering their yards? Maybe not the yard, maybe like the trees or.
So before she answers, I'm gonna give you like a precept to what we have found. So we've been doing the pilot, right, for AMI, which you need to do. Two things are gonna happen. You're gonna have some very, very upset residents who are like finally understanding what they really use, right, as we're detecting the leaks. And then the second thing is our city has become accustomed to certain things. We have residents who do pool repair and then refill their pool and want the discount, the base rate, those kinds of things. We don't have a policy for that. It's been habitual, it's been done, it's expected, and so that's what we do. Or we have folks who are house sitting and they leave things on, and again, it's been an adjustment, it's been due. We have residents who haven't paid their utility bills for 12 months, and that, they're just habits that have been formed that if we're really going to truly be good stewards, we need to correct and put policies in place.
So every time when we have our meetings or when I'm talking to other people and I see kind of a waste or something that contributes to that utility fund, it goes on this list that I have that is now like 20 items long. It is like the pool thing, the 10%, leakage, the people that were just never issued bills. Like these are all like almost crazy stories in the annals of Sunset Valley, and I have them stacked. It's this is easy, this is easy, this is easy. The thing that we just did recently about having a policy to like go capture that money, and you said that might save 60 grand a year, every year. That's pretty good. I mean, you start there. For me, getting rid of the subsidy, it's way down at the bottom because it's unpopular. People will be used to it. I'd be voted off council, like a number of things. But one of the things in there is I don't know if that is the approach that we want. Like maybe we do want people watering the heck out of their trees.
Yes, I mean, we do want people to water, especially their trees. But I think water conservation is area where the city could definitely look at, and I know Planning Environmental will be coming back hopefully in the next weeks or so with the recommendations they did on the rebate programs, on where we need to focus our attention. And they really want the city to focus on water conservation and on the big ticket items that would save the city the most money. And at this point, that's not washing machines, that's not toilets. You have to go out of your way to go find a washing machine that's gonna be a water hog, or a toilet that's gonna be a 5-gallon flush or whatever it is. It's the outdoor irrigation. Yeah. So making sure that we are investing in those programs and encouraging that behavior is probably the better option. And like I said, we'll be coming with those recommendations from the committee to help the city save money, because every gallon that we aren't pumping out into the system is a gallon we're not paying to the city of Austin. So if we can conserve more water through rainwater harvesting and re-irrigation through that water use, however it is, that is what we really need to focus on. Yes, we still want people to water their trees and keep their trees alive. We want, we encourage xeriscaping as much as possible, but we don't want, brown yards all over the city either. Sure, we create other, that it mitigates other dangers and stuff. Right. So we've got to find that balance in the system, and I think focusing on outdoor irrigation for water conservation is going to be our biggest saver.
And this just came to mind when you said why there's extra usage sometimes. This particular bill that I have in front of me shows our normal usage, which is like under 10,000, and then there's one that is just like popping the top off the chart, which is looks like it's gonna be 13 or 14, and it was last April and we were camping, and a homeless man came into our front yard. We saw this on our ring cam, and got a drink from our front hose, left it on, and then for 2 days straight, it was just like pouring out water.
Yeah, so AMI will be helping a lot with that, because we can set up alerts where we'll get a notification saying water is going. Now, I will say this, AMI is still many months off because there is a huge delay on getting those pieces in, so we won't be able to implement that right away, but as we get those meters in, we'll be changing them out and getting the system up and running as soon as possible. And that happened, actually. That's where we had some residents who were out of town who are on our pilot program, and their person left it on and left the water running and was watering trees all over the yard, and it equaled about 25,000 gallons of water overall. So,
Councilmember Reitz, and then I want to comment on this too.
I would like to see a more robust rebate program in a number of areas. One, we have the solar panels. With the new bill that was just passed, I don't know if there'll be more incentives for people to do solar panels, so I want to make sure that's adequately funded. Two, Councilmember Litchfield had the idea of, what if we paid for water retention tanks for every house in our city, and how much would that cost, and what savings would that be, and et cetera. And if we are really concerned about our water, then that is a program that we ought to look at very seriously. The issue to me is it's kind of like the electric car subsidy, where you have to buy a $75,000 car and then you get a subsidy of $10,000. Well, how many people can afford the $75,000 car, And it's nice for those who have that money to do it, but it doesn't help, the regular middle class. And that's the same thing with rebates. That's how rebates work, all of our rebates. You still have to have all that money up front to put in those solar panels, to put in the water retention tank or whatever, or to redo your lawn in a better grass that it's not, Johnson or whatever it is that we have now, that it's a less water, more drought resistance, that type of lawn, or more xeriscaping or whatever. But those are huge upfront costs, and a lot of people just don't have that in their budget. And if we spent some of our funding that way, maybe that is along with our values. And, those are the types of discussions that I want to hear from us and our residents of what they want, So
we did do the preliminary estimates, and a nice catchment system is about $8,000. That's not going to give you potable water. It's enough to capture and re-irrigate. And we estimated that's about a $2 million hit to the utility fund if all 250 households, that was just the number I used, if all 250 households used it, right? If everybody used it. And that is one of those places where it is appropriate. Those are the kinds of things, because we're either going to pay it to the residents or we're going to pay it to the city of Austin. One of the two. There's there's nothing opposite against that. And then we do expect a rate increase from the city of Austin here very soon. So this is almost like pre-tax dollars. If we're going to go ahead and do a program like that, let's do that. We'll have to talk about impervious cover and exemptions and, some plumbing code exemptions and things like that. But that would be a worthwhile investment.
That to me would be huge, and that would make such an impact in this city. Particularly, and that's very consistent along our values, so.
Yeah, and just to echo, I think it's always been difficult to talk cost of service and, increased rates. I think your list idea and what you've been capturing of ways that we can tackle water usage through conservation, through recapture, through water leakage prevention, those are great places to start, because we know those are things that we can do. And the cost of service, we're passing along the increases that we're going to get from City of Austin. That's going to be a hit to the residents, and that's already saying that we need to, until we do a cost of service that really says what is our cost of service, what are we including in that? Are we including staff costs, or what's our 20-year projections? What does our utility funds need to be at? That's a hard, and we've never been very good at that. But I think these other objectives are really things that we should focus on. The one exclusion from that, and I've highlighted this in my mayor's letter, we know what the cost of service is for our waste, solid waste. Yeah. That is not something that we are doing anything about. We're not passing along any increased costs. It is purely a subsidy. It's not subsidizing waste. It's not something, and so I would say that that's an area where we should, at the minimum, look at what our increased costs have been over the last few years and what our projected, it's a 3% increase every year, I think, right? From the contract we have? Or is it 3%?
between 3 and 4, I can't remember the exact
I
number.
mean, we should, at the
100,000,
minimum, have the same policy for our solid waste as we do for our water to pass along those costs. As a starting place, I would say that, there's an argument there to say, again, a graduated maybe way of, increasing those costs to offset that, because that's not an area where, frankly, you can do a whole lot, as far as like, you can't take away people's trash bins and suddenly save money. You have to have like a trash bin per household, and
That's one of those legally required things we
right.
have to do as
And so
a city.
I'd say that that's an area where if we're going to make some focus on the conservation for the water, focus on the reclamation, focus on the water leakage. Those are great things that we can start reducing the water that we use, and I think, and also rebates for like zero-scaping. Let's see if we can, improve and encourage that, or more drought tolerant vegetation. But I think for solid waste, I think that's where we should make a change. I think that's at a minimum have the same policy of saying every year pass along the cost increase. We're paying $4 right now, I think, and that's a small hit, but it's at least a step in the right direction. Councilor Rosengard, and then Mayor Pro Tem. Sorry, it's hard for me to.
Well, you were jumping, but that's okay.
Oh, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Rosengard is deferring to you, so go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Are you sure? Okay. I think that in 2016, I attended one meeting from Budget and Finance, and they were discussing about utilities. And I was naive because I started talking how was my experience with water and wastewater. And we used to be a fund that we subsidize administration and other departments in the places where I was working. So when I start talking, some of the members, they like the idea, but other members, when we finished the meeting, they came, one person in specific, and say, Alfonso, we are a rich city. We have a lot of revenues, a lot of extra money every year. This is the only benefit for all the citizens in the same way. Why? As long as we will have that money, he said, he or she, because I try to say, I don't want that we will do that. And for me, I went home and I was thinking if that was true or no. And it took me time. It took me time because the first thing that I said, I was watching the cost of service for water and wastewater or utilities than that study that they made in 2014. And I took that hours and hours, and I came to see the administrator, and I say, look, I have some proposals. And he saw that, I said, I can do that also. Yeah, but why? We don't kill this from now. I say, I think that we have to do something. But later I understood that again, the community was unclear. Some of them they wanted, and some of them they didn't want. So with the other mayor, in one moment she had that idea, but later we went down. They presented some good information. Two members of the council, including Member Reed, they made one study about that presentation, and I like it. But again, that was down. I continued looking, and after that, I was talking with some neighbors, and they say, look, if in reality we go to that, the minimum to pay no selling water, the minimum, because the people, they will have the faucet, the minimum was around $70,000 per month, the minimum. So I say now, if you don't need to go with the analysis deeply, only you need to go with the tiers. What? Tiers. And I start doing that in 2019. So I was looking the tiers. How much was the cost for the amount of water? Cost and amount of water. So in one moment I put the city of Austin and I put this city. And I say, wow, if we work as the city of Austin, as we are, we increase a lot. And we don't need to do a lot with the 4.25 cents, we can make a lot. Only working with the tiers. Why? Because in the city of Austin, when you pass, I don't remember, it was 25,000 gallons per month, almost you duplicate or triplicate the cost. So instead of paying $4.21, you pay $13 per 1,000 gallons. So when I was looking that, I say, well, it's true that around less than 60 people, they use less than 3,000 gallons a month. And they don't pay. And I saw also that the 30,000 gallons or 10,000 gallons less per month for the 3 months allow us that we don't need to pay wastewater if we are below the 10,000. And wastewater has more subsidy, maybe more than solid waste. So that details, they were looking to conserve water, but conserve water everybody, because the cost that gave it to them the problem. So in the way that if they say, if you use 0 to 2,000 gallons, what's the cost of the water? If you are 2001 and 6,000, you pay, boom, they put that. And also little by little. So the tiers that we have, they don't have that. In addition, they say, from the cost, we will take 5%. We will allocate 5%. So if people, they don't have money to pay for water in Austin, they have that fund. So that ideas, they were good for me. Now, it's very difficult here in this table to start talking about that, because I don't want them, they will hand me because I say that. I agree with that person that he say, if we have a lot of money, why we need to pay? But also, I agree that we don't need to waste too much water, and they need to pay the people that is abusing. So that kind of thing is going with the other. But the people that is using too much, they have to pay. Sometimes the neighbors, they came, look, Alfonso, you don't know, I left my sprinklers and now I pay a lot. I say, yes, because each minute you are using minimum 7 to 8 gallons. So in 10 minutes it's 80 gallons. And the people, they don't understand. No, but it's only, I have 6 areas. And I put 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes. They say it's 90 minutes. And 90 minutes times 80 gallons is 720 gallons. And if you have that 2 times per week, oh yeah. Well, that kind of details is part of the education. When I say, I disagree to spend money. I don't like to spend money. To purchase. I would like to invest money. Invest. And that is different. Why? If we are looking trees, again, $7,500 trees. $7,500 trees. I want to know one inventory of the trees. and how many more we need, and what kind of resources we need to have to preserve the trees that we have. And if we will be planting 300 each year in 10 years, that will be amazing. And if in one moment this city has an award for forest, why we don't go again? And that is investment. Beautification is investment. So I agree with that. With the budget and water, I can do, and I am volunteer in 1 or 2 sessions, if you want, as a workshop. I can do one explanation in my view with the data that we have, in the same way than that PowerPoint that you presented that time, but to talk, because if you remember, we met and we were talking about irrigation for some area. And when you ask me and other people how much money that will be, we say, forget it at that time for that project, because we were doing the numbers. So members of the council, I think that we need to sit down one day, and that is a hot potato, but we need to discuss that. We need to discuss, and only remember, if we are using almost 30% of the water, the houses, and we have revenues of $1 million, put 30% for that 1 million, and it's 333,000. So this is the money that you need to split in the 240 houses, and how that will pay in order to avoid subsidies. But it will be a little more because came the utilities, the infrastructure. So how that will go if we support with reality cost of the utilities and in the proper way. We need to continue using that money, but the people that abuse has to pay more. So with all respect, I think that when we say something, it sometimes sounds good, ideas, but we need to be more effective. And when we say more effective, I saw good ideas at the beginning and in some of the time, but they were froze. And I like that now they are coming out because it's true that I say that I don't participate as a city council member, but I would like to see a lot of things. So that was that I tried to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosengarten, and then just because I want to make sure that we're also respectful of everybody's time. So in the last 20 minutes, I do want to talk about the budget and finance questions that have come up. I don't want to keep staff here longer than I promised them, so I would like to wrap up at noon if we need to schedule additional sessions, for workshop, or if we want, or we can do so. Yeah, and what I'd also like to do is I want to open up for any members of the public that wish to make a 4-minute statement, so that's going to count for part of the time. I recommend that council, if you have edits, to either state them or send them to staff offline. I have a few edits, that I'd like to see in the next revision of this. One of those being the numbers that we have that's related to the budget and finance is that we need to update the tables with the budget and finance recommendation numbers, because they're incorrect in the budget and finance or the budget book compared to what the numbers that were sent in the spreadsheets. Like if you look at the budget tables, the budget and finance recommendation matches essentially the budget book in many areas. And we need to get the correct number in those columns, which is just part of the difference that we want to make sure. With that, I'll go to Councilman Rosengarten, and like I said, I would like to try to get to a lot in the last 20 minutes, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's time as well.
I was hoping we could get to the Chip Young's question, and then I was going to ask if we could extend our meeting, because it's nice to have this continue.
At least one council member has indicated they need to leave at noon, so that's. Well, and Councilmember Johnson also said that he, but I know Councilmember Reese, you also have a commitment late at 2 o'clock today, but also just for staff. So I want to try to keep it as close to 12 as possible. I understand that, you know, we have a lot to work through in terms of our questions. But let's maybe proceed to the Budget and Finance Committee Chair's questions.
Can I make a 2-minute
Oh, yes,
statement?
please go ahead,
Yeah.
Councilmember Reese.
One is, I just wanted to follow up just real briefly on the water conservation program. I kind of think it's dumb that I pay $9 a month sometimes. That's ridiculous. I should pay a little more than that, you know, on that water conservation program. So that I think probably needs to be reviewed. You know, if you're under 3,000, y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay. And then the second issue is open space planning. What amount is put into the budget for that? Is any amount?
So open space planning, what we said at this year's budget is if there's excess revenue, $100,000 would be set aside for open space, or for that fund, you know, that essentially the money that we added $700,000 to last year. So we're going to have excess revenue, we know that. So at least $100,000. It's up to council if we want to change that number, but right now it's $100,000.
And we'll have a little more clarity in the next month.
That's beautification. Are we
Yeah, I think that's where
intermingling?
it's a little bit also this is
Okay.
discussion about the 700K, you know, in my mind is sort of it's intended for these kind of projects, but I think beautification is what we termed it at the time. The open space plan, you know, plan that we were presented with, you know, we could use the beautification funds to fund part of that. We could set aside a different set of money for that. You know, we don't have any money set aside specifically for implementing something in the open space plan. We do have 700K plus the 100K this year set aside for beautification, you know, those type of improvements. Yeah.
There is $500,000 beyond this year every year in that pro forma to show you where the fund would end if council decided to make that large of an investment into the plan. For next year, I programmed Burger Center Trail. We keep hearing that that's not the expense. It's going to be a lot less than that. So for next year, I had programmed 220. For this year, the discussion was if there's going to be anything funded, it's the 250 that's already within the 700. And my recommendation to the mayor and to the council is that for the open space master plan, we have 3 major nodes, essentially. We have City Hall, Uplands, and Upper Cougar Creek, right? Those are the nodes. That we, if we're gonna invest anything, do at least 150,000, 50 per node to vet that out further, right? From the presentation that you saw. And give that back to the ad hoc committee, let them work through that, and then issue what are essentially RFPs to end up with a more clear plan moving forward.
So perhaps we could use a work session, an upcoming work session to kind of work through this a little bit more, Mayor? Is that, if that would be appropriate?
I think so. If we're going to get into the details of
I'd like to start making progress.
I would
in
too,
some of
yeah.
We
this
can
stuff,
do it on
so.
the September 6th.
So there's no pre-work session before the meeting right now?
No,
Okay.
so we can do that.
Let's do that, and then that gives us time to put money if we needed to allocate more and stuff, so
Right.
that'd be great if we could do that.
All right. So, Sylvia, can you bring up the questions from the Budget and Finance Chair and make sure that we are, and if you can go through the answers that are provided by staff, because I know there's a number of emails that we're trying to aggregate as well.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Okay, so I went through the comments that the chair included in the email. The first one is, why was the additional transfer of 1.5 million added to the budget? And as Sylvia discussed earlier, it is 1.317 for CIP projects, 235,000 for crime control to cover the deficit, and 14,000 to cover the general fund deficit. And then the next part of that was the $250,000 for open space project. I had mistakenly thought that they had wanted to add that to the budget. Sylvia corrected me, so that was my mistake. We will remove that from the budget and finance recommendation column. Second question was answered, part of the open space thing that we just talked about. Number 3, here he's going through the variation between the different funds and the original estimate and the updated estimate. So one of the biggest things was I used actuals, not budget, whenever I was estimating the cost of what I expected to have. We had an increase in some funds of spending, decrease in some funds of spending. It was about a 6-month difference, so there's going to be some difference in those numbers. The CIP fund, that is something that we created in the FY22 budget. Maybe it wasn't clear that it was created, but that is what we've been using this entire year for FY22 CIP projects. So we added that as part of the estimate in the budget summary. And that's 1.7 million is what we expect to have remaining. That number might change depending on whether or not people start spending more money for projects as the year goes on. Although there's only like 2 months left, so there's not very much time left to spend very much. And then the general fund, that was my mistake. I forgot to add the transfer for subsidies and repair and replacement, which was in the budget, which totaled like almost $1 million. And then there was also a transfer in the committed funds section of that budget summary. I included the CIP estimate of what we were going to encumber between FY22 and FY23. I moved that amount from each of those funds into the CIP fund. So that's $265,000 for CIP projects moved from the general fund to CIP. And then the utility fund, that is another one that's a big chunk of that difference is $1 million that was moved for CIP projects. Street fund, same thing. There was $500,000 moved for CIP projects. Venue fund, there was an increase in what we expect to have in the bank, and that is due to just decrease in expenses in the last 6 months. Repair and replacement, that one can easily be moved to, or that one is easily described as crime control changes. So we've moved a lot of items that were supposed to be repair and replacement to crime control. And then that last part, he's saying $3.2 million from our largest funds, general fund, street, and utility, is a decrease. Most of that is going to be CIP, which is that $1.9 million that we moved, and then the $900,000 for subsidies, which brings the difference to only $300,000, which between 3 months and 3 large funds is not, or sorry, 6 months and 3 large funds is not a very big difference. And then the last one, or sorry, number 4, subsidy transfer in, the $84,000. So that is, as Sylvia explained earlier, there was a difference between calculating the COLA and some insurance amounts. We're referencing old data. So we went and we found that the amounts that we were that we had budgeted for medical insurance, dental and vision was incorrect. So we went and updated those numbers. So it made a difference between those line items from what budget and finance saw and what we gave to the mayor. And then that answers number 5 as well. And number 6, that one is, the transfer to reserves line. So that one is the $210,000. So the way that Sylvia explained it earlier was fairly accurate. It's not for operational expenses, so I didn't want to keep it in the operational budget. I had it as a transfer out as move to reserves so that it doesn't get confused and people think it's there to be spent on operational expenses. And that was, I assumed, what it was supposed to be used for, since it was a transfer or a subsidy from the general fund to the utility fund. So I moved it, I put it in there as a transfer to reserves. And I think that was all.
So I think one of the things that came across, from both the chair's perspective and from staff is that the turnaround time between the last meeting and Budget and Finance and getting the budget prepared and filed is too short, right? We need to have at least an extra meeting programmed in there to make sure that we go over corrections or that these get caught earlier in the process, right? So that's, I think, one kind of big item. The other is, just in terms of like how we account for paying for CIP seems to make up the majority of the misunderstanding, right? In terms of, the CIP projects recommended by Public Works, approved, for Budget and Finance, but not showing that they're transferring out of reserves. I think there was some, misunderstanding and confusion. And the assumption that we have a CIP fund is something that I was working with too. That's my, my own personal perception, but I think there's that setting up a new fund should be something that I think Budget and Finance obviously wants to weigh in on and get, feedback, an opportunity to give feedback to. But I think that's just the idea that we don't have a balanced budget, and that's my mistake in stating that in my transmission letter. We have a budget that is relying on pulling down our reserves to pay for CIP projects, and that's a lot of money, right? When we talk about balanced budget, it's in the absence of accounting for the CIP projects, and that's something that residents do deserve to know about. But it's also explainable by the fact that we've been saving up money, and I think that's part of this. But it's something that I'm going to correct in my letter, and when we do the final budget, I go through and make corrections as well. But that's a big point, and I think it's something that Budget and Finance, also rightly, needs to understand where that money is coming from, so they can weigh in and say, is that valuable to do, or are there some other factors? So I appreciate, but certainly the chair coming and making sure that we have their questions, we have some answers from staff or answers from staff. I don't know if we have time to fully break this out further. I do want to hear from the chair, so they get an opportunity to speak as well as from members of the public. I think at a minimum, though, we can do that process, for the Budget and Finance better, right, in terms of making sure that they see the final version that is transparent. So with that, I'll invite the chair to make comments, and then I would like to hear from other residents that may want to make comments as well.
Okay. First, thank you for that presentation, Suzanne. I'm glad you answered all those questions. The reason I asked those questions is I wanted you to understand what those changes were. I think that should have all been laid out clearly in the original documents you received. That here's what happened between the last finance meeting and our presentation of this to you. That should all be clear and explicit. I think that's important. Our other big objection was that all of a sudden this CIP fund appeared, which was news to us. Again, there shouldn't be any surprises in this. I think you put it very well, Mr. Ware. We expect to be able to see that and see the whole picture, and we didn't. And if we've been provided with all this information, and you've been provided with all this information, there would be no controversy here at all, right? Budget and Finance job and my job should have been done on August 4th. I shouldn't have to be here. You shouldn't have to have all this explained to you. It should have been explained to you. And that's the point I'm trying to make. This is not good process for things to happen, excuse me, for things to happen this way. I also want to address one other thing that's kind of bothering me, which is I see the word misinformation tossed around a lot. And I have a problem with that. I work for a company that, I now work for a company that's a nonprofit that works on providing disinformation to governments and other entities, right? We have a very precise definition of what misinformation and disinformation is. Misinformation is not when you disagree about someone else or you think that they're wrong. Misinformation is a narrative that is intended to in some way cause harm. So I would suggest that in our communications with each other, we all stop using that word. It's a loaded word. It's an unfortunate word. But I want to thank everyone for all the hard work we put into the budget. And I also want to echo something that Mayor Pro Tem said and the mayor said. On finance, we are certainly not in favor of not spending money. We do have a big pot of money, and we should be investing in this community. I think the mayor's ideas about public infrastructure are great, and we should pursue them more. I also think that we should look at subsidies, as Councilmember Reese suggests, and make that part of our long-term planning. And one of the things that came out of the finance meetings was the importance of reviving our long-term planning to help council and others make better decisions about what we want to do in the future. Finally, on the subject of revenues, yes, we did decide, we did recommend that they be cut by 5% because of the volatility in the current economic situation, right? We've got high inflation that may be balanced out by high unemployment, but we don't know. We still have supply chain issues, which obviously are driving up the prices of everything we want to do. So we felt it was best to be conservative on our revenue projections. The worst thing that's going to happen is that we're going to get in more revenues than we expected, which is not a bad thing. One of the reasons we didn't approve some of the requests for additional expenses, for example, on Sunset Trail and Lone Oak, and for open space projects, is that we only wanted to see better and more defined laid out plans of what we want to do. But we certainly think we should be investing in all of those things. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your work with the rest of the committee this year. All right, and we'll take other comments from the members of the public. And as a note staff, I have been taking notes about action items that we're going to be bringing back. I think that just if you do, reiterate that if we do have edits, please send those to Sylvia and to Susanna so that we can make sure that those are incorporated in the next version of the budget revision that we have. Even if it's just typos, I like cleaning up typos. So with that, go ahead and back to the public comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I wanted to talk about the CIP. We had a meeting recently in Public Works because I've been pushing for a long time to see an updated version of our 30, 40-year plan, depending on where those pipes are, because that's what kicked it out. It was essentially about a 20-year plan, but then the pipes kicked it out to 40. And so we're getting that from Carolyn, but we did some quick math, and that fund should have about $4 million in it. And we're okay right now, so there's no need to change it in this year's budget, but Carolyn is working on actual figures to see where we need to be with that. But right now, we're fine. 210 is not our burn rate. It's about 400K roughly is what we kind of ballparked, but we're still okay right now. And so the problem with that fund, so we have always done this ever since they created that long-range plan. And then at some point they started putting the pipes in better, and we even put the well in it, because I was like, why is this the stepchild? Why is the well the stepchild of infrastructure? I said that for years. And finally that got put in the circulation. So we essentially did have long-range plans for everything. We have for forever, right? So this is not a new thing. And the CIP is different words for what we always did. But we did it in a better window, and in my opinion, a better window. And the window was about 3 years. And the reason we can do this is because we fully fund. Because we put that money away, because that is a stable system, we don't have to go 5 years. You go 5 years when you have to go figure out where your funds are. But we can be nimble. And this is the thing of essentially being a small business, which is what we are, is that we have less advantages than some of the big players do, but we can be nimble. And so we can every year say, do we need to do this? Do we not need to do that? And so we don't have to waste a lot of money. Since we've gone to this 5-year plan, we instantly got this new business of the CIP that starts sucking money for engineering, for all this planning that I don't see the value of. And the reason I don't see the value of it is instantly this business cost us $50K, right? The planning for all of this, where we already had pre-existing planning, cost us $50K. It was supposed to be 20, went to 50. And so it becomes this engineering suck to keep redoing this long plan. I really believe we have always had a long-range plan. I believe that the quick response, especially in this environment, is more effective and important for us to do, to always reevaluate. Are we going to do this road, or are we not going to do this road? And then you have things in the pipeline, but the cycle that I've seen is about 3-4 years max. you know, because sometimes, and you just, and then you just get a bad bid and you say, kick it to the curb, it just wasn't that big a priority. You know, so I really do think that we need to evaluate that, and if we're just paying money to a drain, you know, that's excess planning that doesn't serve us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak at this time? All right. So I know Councilmember Johnson has to leave. I suggest that the action items, I'm going to send out a list. I'll send it out to council, the things that I captured, and to staff. But the one, we will be visiting the public, the open space as our next workshop item ahead of our September 6th meeting. Again, if you have edits to the budget, I would like staff, if we can bring back a revised budget for September 6th with edits. I have a list of things that I want to make sure that we include, and you may have already, and staff may have already had some captured as well. This is, and if we need to have extra sessions, we can. I don't want to cut this off artificially, but just to be respectful, I want to make sure today's session has been really great. You know, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk, you know, about the budget in this fashion and to work through our, you know, our process. I mean, this is what we do. You know, we're funding our government. We're making sure that we're providing services to the community. With that, any further comments from council as a way before we close our business today? Thank you, staff, for giving up part of your Saturday, coming in, and for all the hard work. We still have more work to do, you know, on this, but I really appreciate taking the time out of your weekend to support this. Thanks, Matt, for doing the extra errand of going to Bougie's Donuts and getting some treats for everyone, and for going to Stout House. And I appreciate everybody's time. Councilman Rosengarten?
Is there any documents in our budget book that needs to be updated? We will send out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. For that information.
And thank you for members of the public that have spent their Saturday with us as well. It's always great to have interest and participation. With that, I'm going to close our session at 12 o'clock.